Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. We hope that you enjoy today's sermon by our pastoral staff at Christpoint Church. We also want you to know that if you have any questions, prayer requests, or need information on any of our ministry opportunities, you can email us at info@christpoint.church. We love you and we are praying that this will be the best year yet. Welcome home.
Remember this, Babylon was not and was never teaching young men of God to speak pagan. This is what's so cool. This is what the devil thinks he's doing. He thinks he's changing the language of the youth. They were never changing the language of the youth to speak pagan. Unbeknownst to them, God was setting up a language to later on communicate God to the Chaldeans. So I love the way God works. You go ahead and do what you think, and you think it's going to work, but it's not going to work because in the end the song says, I get my victory. And I'm going to walk in my victory, and I'm not going to walk in my victory with my head down. I'm going to walk with my head up. So God was teaching a language to them so they could convey that language of God to the people around them, the Chaldeans. So we're going to get there in a minute. We will never lead a family to Jesus if we never learn their language. Show you what this looks like. More families are learning about Jesus on the soccer field than they are in the Sunday school room. More families, because you know why? Because you're sitting here, you're watching a soccer game. Kids can't do this very well anyway. They're just young. They can't do this very well anyway. And you're sitting there and you say, hey, have I told you about our women's retreat that we're going on with the church? Really? I'd love to be able to do something like that. Well, why don't you come? Yay! You sit back down and you start talking about your kid. You start talking about the retreat. Your kid did something, fell down or something. You thought it was great. So all of a sudden, but this person gets invited to church by something that's non-threatening, and the next thing you know, they're involved in serving the Lord. Their lives are changed. More families are learning about Jesus on the soccer field. Young parents are telling young parents about Jesus at a ball game. So, how do we thrive in Babylon? So, number one is we learn the language. We learn the language. Not so we can become more like the language, like the people who teach the language. We learn the language so we can convey Jesus to them. So how do we thrive in Babylon? Number 2 is located in verse 8. Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food. I ain't eating that. Now, I've been out with Jason Yacht. Jason Yacht's a very picky eater. I'm not eating that. I'm like, Jason, it's chicken strips. I'm not eating that. So Jason has like 2 things he eats, and it's like a hamburger and a Coke. So that's it. So, but no, I'm just kidding. But I've heard Jason say, I'm not eating that, and you're not going to make me eat it. So this is what Daniel says. Look, I have a resolve. Here's the thing. Here's number 2 on the list of how do we survive in Babylon. We survive in Babylon by standing for God. Standing for God is attractive. I don't care what people say. Your commitment is attractive to people. People are attracted to commitment. Let me just show you what this looks like. Person number 1 says, I will be there. And for a solid year, every time they said they would be there, they'll be there. And you know what? You're attracted to that because you can count on that. Person number 2 says, I will be there. And 2 out of 10 times they showed up. You're not attracted to this person. You're not drawn to this person. This person let you down too many times. So look, I'm not going to put much stock in you because you don't have any merit behind, you don't have any standing behind your word. So commitment is attractive and people are drawn to resolve. They're drawn to personal convictions. Do you want me to mix you a drink? Well, number 2 guy, do you want me to mix you a drink? No, sir, I don't drink because it's not for kings. In Proverbs 31 says it's not for kings, so I don't drink. Well, then you jump back. I won't want to be like him. People are drawn to the resolve. You know what somebody says? I respect that. So verse 9, God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief eunuchs. Now, if you notice something here, not the chief eunuch, but the chief eunuchs. These are guys that are low-level leaders. So they're low-level leaders that are in charge of feeding these young men, getting them as healthy and presentable. And you notice it's plural. It's plural. Everyone around Daniel was drawn to Daniel because of his resolve, because of the favor that God had placed in him. So, how do we thrive in Babylon? Number 3 is attractiveness. We've got to be attractive. And how do we become attractive? We become attractive by standing our ground for what we believe in. What do we believe in? We believe in what the Word says. That's what we believe in. So I'm sorry. I don't want to offend you. Those of you watching and viewing, I don't want to offend you. But I'm going to tell you what I'm not going to do. I'm definitely not going to offend the Lord. So that's where we have to figure out where we're standing. So standing when somebody else doesn't is attractive. So, number 4, how do we thrive in Babylon? Daniel chapter 2, verse 14. It's a little word called favor. And I'm going to show you how this favor begins to build. So, Daniel replied with prudence and discretion to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard. So, here's the thing. We've already got the eunuchs that are trying to feed them. And Daniel says, we don't eat like that. If you will let us eat like we want to eat for 10 days, and then we'll compare to your guys, see who's the healthiest. So in other words, he's won favor with the low-tier leaders. Now we have Arioch, the captain of the guard, which is a higher-tier leader. So Daniel has favor with the low-tier leaders. Now all of a sudden, this guy is sent to kill every one of them because, what's going on here? Nobody can interpret the dream. Go kill everybody. So the king has sent this captain of the guard, and this is what happens. This is what happens. Daniel replied with prudence and discretion to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard. Now here's the thing. Who talks to the king? Who changes that guy's mind? Because the king gave an order to kill him, and you are talking to me and changing my mind. Now I got to go back and tell the king that I didn't do it. So that was punishable by death. So he had favor with this guy. So he is moving this guy's opinion. So God gave Daniel favor with the low-tier leaders, with the middle-tier leaders, and changed the entire course of their circumstances. So how do we thrive in Babylon? Well, attractiveness. And we thrive by favor. And number 15 is located in verse 18. Seek mercy from the God of heaven. This is what he does. He says, look, they're going to kill all of us. So he goes back to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He goes back to them and he says, look, I need you to go into prayer. So this is what I love. I'm not just going to go on me. I'm not just going to go on my merit or my standing. I'm going to go into this battle knowing that I'm bathing it in prayer. So seek from the God of heaven. Become humble. Know that God is the only one that sets. In verse 21, Daniel says, oh Lord, you set kings and you remove kings. So in other words, this king thinks he's above even you. And I'm telling you right now, I'm speaking power and life into my situation. You are better. You're the one that sets this king. You're the one that has power over this king. And you're going to show him here in just a little bit. So become humble and know that God is the only one that can set and remove kings. Our favor, our victory is never a result of our own merit or our own abilities. It will never happen. And we're going to see we're going to show you what that looks like when I start taking credit for it. So, verses 26 and 7. This is what the king says. Are you able to make known to me? This is a different story. He has a different situation. Now, are you able to make known to me the dream that I have seen and its interpretation? So this is what is so cool. I'm sorry, it's the same. This is the same one. Are you able to make known to me the dream that I've seen? See, this is what the king says. I'm not telling any of you guys the dream because you'll make up anything and you'll trick me. You won't be honest. But I'm going to say it this way. If you'll tell me what I'm dreaming, then I'll know you have the interpretation. So then I know you're hearing from something bigger than me because he don't understand God at this point. So they can't tell him. Nobody can tell him, so he gets mad. He's going to have all of them killed. So this is what I love what Daniel says. When you're straight up talking to the king like this, man, you know you're walking with the Lord. So are you able to make known to me? You notice he says, are you able to make known to me the meaning of the dream and its interpretation? I love 27. I love what Daniel says. No, can't do it. Not going to happen, oh great king. You're awesome. I can't do it. I'm thinking his life's teetering on an edge anyway. And all I got to do is say one wrong thing, and I tell him no, he may not even listen to anything else. Come and get him, take him out of here, kill him, cut his head off. So no, can't do it. No human can do it. Your magicians can't do it. Your diviners can't do it. I can't do it. No prophet can do it. But I tell you who can. His name's God. God can tell me your dream, and then God can tell me the interpretation of your dream. And I've already got guys sitting up praying. So, thriving means don't give yourself credit for what God is doing. See, we got to remember, we can't give ourselves credit for what God is doing. King Nebuchadnezzar does that in just a little bit. So we can't give ourselves credit for what God is obviously doing. So how do we thrive in Babylon? Verse 48. The king esteemed Daniel and made him ruler over the whole land. See, number 6, we don't just survive, we thrive. And we don't just thrive by having favor with low-tier leaders. We don't just thrive by having favor with middle-tier leaders. We thrive by having favor with that level, and the king. He won the king by interpreting, told him what dream he had in his sleep. He kept secret, didn't tell anybody. God told him, he gave him the dream, he gave him the interpretation. So, God esteemed Daniel in verse 48 and made him ruler over the whole land. So all of a sudden we've got a little Hebrew guy from 700-800, maybe 1,000 miles away from home, and he is in a land that he don't even hardly speak the language. He's learned it by now. And now we've got him being number 2 guy in the entire land. Now you talk about favor, that's favor. So number 6 is favor with the king. Got to have favor with the king. Notice what happens right here in verse 46. King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face and he honored, basically paid homage to Daniel. Fell on his face, paid homage. See, let me just sing this song for you. Kings and kingdoms, they'll all pass away, but there's something about that name. See, the thing is it doesn't matter if you call yourself a king or if you call this your kingdom, it's all going to pass away. God sets and removes those anyway. So we got to remember, it's not us. So King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face. Kings and kingdoms, they'll all pass away. They'll bow down before you. And Daniel all of a sudden is being basically esteemed number 2 position in the entire land. If your walk is attractive enough, kings will make notice of it. Kings will notice it. So how do we thrive in Babylon? Number 7, Daniel chapter 4, verse 19. Daniel was dismayed for a while, and his thoughts alarmed him, and the king answered him, and he said to Daniel, Daniel, let not the dream or its interpretation alarm you. So I want to tell you what's happening here. The king has another dream. And on this note, he's trusting Daniel. And he says, here's my dream. Would you give me the interpretation? Because I know you hear from the Lord. And so Daniel says, I'm troubled by this, king. I'm troubled because I'm troubled. I'm about to tell you something that you don't want to hear. So the king says, don't be alarmed by the dream or its interpretation. Just speak the truth to me. Just tell me what it is. So this is what he says. He says, well, this is what's going to happen to you, king. You're going to go crazy. You're going to go mad for 7 years. You're going to graze on the hillsides like an animal. You're going to be out there day and night because the dew's going to fall on you. And your hair's going to grow out like a wild animal. And you're going to be nuts for 7 years. So in verse 27, you've got favor with the king when you can speak like this. Therefore, O king, let me counsel you. Therefore, O king, let me counsel you, be acceptable to you. Here's my counsel to you. Stop sinning. Stop practicing sinful things. Practice righteousness, show mercy, and be humble. If you will do this, you might not have to enter into this 7-year deal. But if you don't do this, I'm telling you, God, show me what's about to happen to you. So, we thrive by speaking the truth, whether the truth hurts or not. The truth may not make us popular, but we speak it. The truth may not make people around us happy, but we speak it. So the truth is I can't water down the gospel to make you happy. I don't want to offend you, but I'm definitely not going to offend the word. So this is where we're going to stand. So I didn't make the rules, don't shoot the messenger. So this is where we are. So speak the truth. Truth is attractive, even if it isn't what the king wants to hear. So King Nebuchadnezzar, a few verses later, takes credit for what happens. He looks at it and he says, look at everything that I have built. And at that very moment, he went crazy. He went crazy. He's eating grass on the hillside. This guy's mad. This is the king. He's gone mad for 7 years. And the very moment that the 7 years was up, he lifted his eyes, his wits came back to him, and he turned to God. So sometimes, let me make you this challenge. Please don't make 7 years of nutness, craziness, be the thing that forces you to walk with the Lord. My gosh, walk now. Take some advice from Daniel and walk in the power and the wonder of the Lord now. Now, don't waste 7 years. So, how do we thrive in Babylon? Number 8 is let your reputation speak for itself. Your reputation will speak louder than your words. Let your reputation speak for itself. Now we've got, in chapter 5, we've got a different king. This is the grandson, actually, of Nebuchadnezzar. He's a different king. He's actually king in place of his father, who's away basically setting up monuments to sin. And that's literally an idol called sin. And so he's kind of like the son of the king. And so he's had this thing. He pulls out the chalices, all this stuff, and his hand starts floating on the wall. We talked about it a few months ago. And starts writing on the wall, and he freaks out. He's freaking out. This guy is freaked out. So he's freaking out. Everything's going on. In verse 11, chapter 5, Daniel's reputation spoke louder than his words. The queen says, "There's a man in your kingdom in whom the spirit of the holy gods is upon him." So when she meant holy God, she didn't understand God. But she says, look, there's a guy in your kingdom. You don't even have to go very far. This guy can figure this stuff out. This guy has the Spirit of God upon him, and God is moving through him. So I'm telling you, and this was the reputation. His reputation went farther than his voice. So let your reputation speak for itself. We don't have to defend ourselves. I know I'm usually the one who wants to. I didn't do that. Or I didn't say that. Or, it's just like, look, I don't have to answer you. I don't have to answer you because I know who I am in the Lord. I don't even have to answer you. And when you're in a position where people are watching on TV and that kind of thing, and people are showing up, they're going to say everything in the world about you. Because you know what? They feel better about themselves when they bring somebody else down. So, here's the thing. People don't need to know about how great you are. This pastor right here is awesome. She's great at everything her hand touches. But people don't need to know how great she is, because I'm going to tell you her mentality. People don't need to know how great we are. All they need to know is just how great God is in us. That's all we need to know, is how great God is in her. That's all we need to know. So you give him a hand. Come on. He's deserving. Because of God in him, being Daniel, in verse 29, once again, Daniel was made chief ruler, third in command. The reason, if you ever noticed that, third is because the king was away setting up, worship places to sin. The king's son was in place, and he was made third in charge. So basically, he's number 2 ruler again. So Daniel, to a different king. So once again, Daniel was made chief ruler, second only to the king. So how do we thrive in Babylon? Number 9 is here. This is probably key to everything. Let's just point our face toward his face. Let's make sure our face is pointed toward his face. In Daniel chapter 6, verse 10. Now we've got a new king. And we've got basically the Persians that have come in, and they have overthrown the Chaldeans, and Babylon is now in occupation, or basically owned, so to speak, by the Medes and the Persians, and Darius is placed into leadership, into king. So they trick Darius. Darius likes Daniel. And they trick him into this whole pray to you, all this stuff, and nobody else to be put to death. And he falls for it. Probably Daniel wasn't there to give him some good advice. So anybody that prays to anything other than you, they're going to be thrown in the lion's den. So what does Daniel do? He knew it was illegal to pray. What are we going to do when one of these days it's illegal to pray? Because I'm going to tell you something. In Oregon, you cannot attend a church service unless you are vaccinated. What are we going to do when I'm just telling you, we've read about this, we've studied about this, and one of these days, what's going to happen when we're not allowed? It was illegal to pray, so what does Daniel do? He went home and he prayed. Not only did he go home and he prayed not one time a day, he prayed 3 times a day. Not only did he pray 3 times a day, he prayed with his window open every day. So he prayed with his window open and he faced himself toward the temple in Jerusalem. See, here's the thing. He knew his God was all over the place, but their mentality was the prayers that went up and the incense and the sacrifices, all that happened in the temple. So he faced himself maybe 1,000 miles away. I can't see it, but I'm going to pray toward the temple. That was the last connection I saw to God. This is why people will come to you and ask you to pray, because that's the last connection they saw to God. Would you pray for my mama? Yes, I will. Let's mean you pray together, because I want to teach you how to face yourself toward God. See, we'll go to parents, teachers, friends, pastors. The last place he knew that there was a connection, a vertical connection, was in the temple. That's what they knew at the time. The last place prayers were lifted up was there in the temple. He pointed his face toward God's face. Let me say this, and if you don't get anything, please get this part. Look, it's circled in green. Please get this part. Please do. We will never thrive in any situation as long as we're facing the wrong God. Please get this. Please figure this out. As long as we're facing the wrong God, we will never thrive in any situation. So how do we thrive in Babylon? Number 10, Daniel chapter 6, verse 28. Live well. Live well. You don't know how many times that has resonated in my spirit, probably in the last almost 40 years, at least 37 or 8 years. Live well. Prosper. Don't let the situation dictate what's going on in your life. Prosper despite what the king of the kingdom, what king or kingdom you're under. Prosper. Daniel served 4 Babylonian kings. He became chief ruler, second only to each one of those. And let me show you what happened. Talking about learning the language, talking about speaking into situations, talking about thriving in Babylon. Let me show you what happened. King Nebuchadnezzar had to go through a process, even went mad nuts for a little while. So, King Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel spoke into the ear of the king. What happened to King Nebuchadnezzar? He turned to God. King Belshazzar, the grandson, really not much chance for him. He rejected God and he died. We don't know what happened in that little minute, but he died that night. So King Darius the Mede comes in, turned to God. King Cyrus, who was basically the king who overthrew, he served and honored God. Let me show you in Ezra chapter 1, verse 2. This is what Cyrus says. I want you to notice the difference between the voice of Cyrus and the voice of Nebuchadnezzar. Thus says Cyrus, king of Persia. So in their mentality, they have conquered the world. The Lord the Lord God has given me all the kingdoms of the earth. Now this is what Cyrus says. Wow. Look at the blessings and the favor that God has placed upon me. God has given me, He gave it to me, all the lands that I can see. Let me show you what Nebuchadnezzar said. Nebuchadnezzar said, look at everything I've done. God struck him mad that night, that very moment. So look at everything I've done. This is what what Cyrus said. Look at what God did, and I got to be a benefit from it. So, verse 3. All of you that want to go home, you're free to do so. So now I'm king. I'm over the land that you were exiled under. You're 800,000 miles away. Going home. You're free to go because you're God's people. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to go home. This is the king who's serving the Lord. I want you to go home. And not only that, in verse 4, I'm going to fund your return, and then I'm going to fund rebuilding the temple. So, see, every situation's not the worst situation in the world. Our victory is there. We just got to walk like our victory's there. We can't walk with our heads down, and we sure cannot fight defensively. We've got to fight offensively. Because the minute we fight and start moving back is the minute we start getting cut in the wrong places. So, let me show you what thriving looks like uncovered. Let me show you the results and the evidence of thriving. Let me show you what it looks like. I want to go back to Daniel chapter 1. Now, there's a few things in our lives that you have to have health. You have to have stamina. You have to have some of these things. I mean, it doesn't matter if you get old if you can enjoy getting old. So let me show you what it looks like. Let me show you what it looks like thriving. Daniel chapter 1, verse 15. God gave them exceptional health while they were in Babylon. Exceptional health while they were in Babylon. Daniel chapter 1, verse 17. God gave them exceptional wisdom and understanding while they were in Babylon. Not somewhere else. While they were in Babylon, He stood them out with exceptional health. He stood them out with exceptional wisdom. He stood them out with exceptional understanding. And in verse 20, God gave them not just favor, but He gave them 10 times the favor. Tenfold. He gave them 10 times the favor. In other words, He gave them exceptional health that stood out. He gave them exceptional wisdom and understanding that stood out. And He gave them the ability to impress that stood out. I just love this mentality. My word, thrive and stand out. Stand out. When nobody else is praying, try to start praying. When nobody else is speaking Jesus, try to start speaking Jesus and see if something don't start happening. See, the secret was never their ability. Never Daniel, never the Hebrew boys that were cast in the fire, never Cyrus or Darius or Nebuchadnezzar. None of it was never their ability, it was always their faith. This is what allows us to thrive in imperfect conditions. Is we are literally, it is our faith of the one we're serving. That's all that matters, is to have the faith. Hello again, and thank you for tuning in. I pray that today's sermon has spoken to your heart and has ministered to you well. We just want you to know that we have 2 locations. One at our Sparta campus, our main campus at Sparta on the square in Sparta, and our second campus is at Smithfield behind Ace Hardware. And we would love for you to call Christpoint Church your church home. And if you're viewing this and you can't get in to church and you feel like you want to be a part of the church, then you can always be a part of the church. Just drop us a note and let us know that you enjoy being on board with us. And if you'd like to give and be a part of the ministry, then you can do that by just sending a check to one of the locations at 614 Murphy Street, Smithfield, 13 Liberty Square in Sparta, and we'll get you on the road. We just love you so much. And you can download the Christpoint Church of Tennessee app, and you can give online. So we are real people. We're living real lives, and we're serving a real God. And we just want to tell everyone, welcome home. We're so glad that you tuned in with us. Welcome home.